Welcome to the Wolverine TV. I am Clayton Sayfie with Chris Balas and Austin Fox from thewolverine.com. Check us out over there. You get 60 days of our premium content for free using the promo code BLUE60. Perfect time because there is info flying around all over the place about Michigan, who is shut down right now with a COVID outbreak. Game against Maryland canceled. We'll get into all that. And then also, starting to get rumblings about Jim Harbaugh, his future at Michigan, the rest of the coaching staff as the season kind of winds down and looks like it could possibly not resume. And obviously, we'll talk about that here in just a second. But guys, no game this weekend against Maryland, coming off of a disappointing loss against Penn State, and now that puts the Michigan-Ohio State game in doubt as well. And I saw Ohio State; they're playing Michigan State, but ton of guys out for the Buckeyes this week, and it would have been interesting to see what that game would look like. But just doesn't look like it's going to be able to.
You're talking about the Michigan-Ohio State game.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like it's going to happen. Michigan's cases continue to rise from everybody that we've spoken with. And in fact, Michigan put out its numbers yesterday, and you can see that they're starting to climb. And, is it that the kids aren't social distancing? It's like, oh, well, our season's gone down the tank, so let's go see our girlfriends. Is it that simple? Hard to say, but the interesting thing is it hasn't really affected the other sports yet. We know that there's a lot of I'm not going to call it cross-pollination, but there's a lot of kids that hang out with kids from other sports, and that was an issue in the summer. So, we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't affect basketball. Hopefully it doesn't affect hockey and sports like that. But at this point, man, I don't think there's any way. And in fact, Michigan, from the people that we were talking to last week, was saying, hey, we aren't going to rush to get back if we aren't healthy and these kids aren't healthy, and that safety is going to come first. In fact, Ohio State is the only school right now that hasn't had a 2-week layoff when they've had a 1-week layoff, if I'm not mistaken, in football. So it really makes more sense to me that Michigan, Ohio State won't be played. I think that's probably going to be the case, guys, that you're going to see that game's going to be canceled. It might happen as soon as Monday, because that's when a lot of these kids were the early of these kids were expected back.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if that game happens as well at this point. I think we kind of saw the writing on the wall when they announced the cancellation of the Maryland game, and I guess the focus now turns to whether that ninth game on December 19th will be played. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not. I know not many teams around the country have had 3 games in a row canceled, but again, with the way this thing is going, it looks like that's a real possibility, and maybe it's just for the best at this point to kind of put a wrap on this season and turn the page. It's hard to imagine a bowl game happening as well with the way bowl games are being canceled around the country, and Michigan only having 2 wins and, not likely to receive an invite. So, yeah, again, the writing's on the wall, and I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen the last of this Michigan team for 2020.
Yeah, and an outbreak is first you got to stop it, and then you got to get it to go in the other direction and come back. And Daryl Conway, chief medical officer for the Michigan Athletic Department, was speaking with MGO Blue TV the other day, and he was asked, when could they return? He said, well, we're hopeful that when we're cleared to return, we'll do so quickly and, be able to have a smooth transition back to the building. But he said he's not about to lose a license over a football game. He's not about to lose a license. And he said, everybody around the Big Ten and his role for their specific program is in the same boat from what he's talked to. And we've seen teams, like you mentioned, Chris, miss 2 games in a row because they just can't, get this thing under control. Obviously, I mean, it's a huge problem throughout the country. So we will see. Very, very unlikely that it gets played. And then the crossover game, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows if, the Big Ten just throws Ohio State a bone and gives them a game next week against another team that has a game canceled and tries to get them in the Big Ten championship. It's going to be interesting. It's unprecedented times, and things like that could happen. I guess, what does this do for Michigan now? If this is it for Michigan, you avoid what looked like an imminent disaster against Ohio State next week. At the same time, you didn't get the opportunity this weekend to maybe prove yourself against a Maryland team. But I guess, what does this do? That this could be Michigan's last game.
What are you proving against a Maryland team if you don't have your 2 top quarterbacks, and you're playing Wildcat with, Hassan Haskins on every other snap and maybe freshman Dan Villari's in there? It would have been, it's just another asterisk on this asterisk-laden season. And let's go back and talk about that bullshit thing with Ohio State getting an extra game. How do you think that makes Northwestern feel? And how do you think that would make Indiana feel and all these
Indiana, who would get in the title?
Right, except that, with Michael Penix out, they're going to lose a couple games probably here in the next couple of weeks, maybe. Who knows? Maybe they've got a guy but that's garbage, man. You don't make exceptions after the fact. The rules pertain to everybody, and Ohio State, blah 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 blah. I would say the same thing if it were Michigan. It's not fair to the teams that have been following the rules, and if you're going to give them an extra game, then you better give some of these other teams let them make up their games too. And it doesn't make any sense to me. So, but that's the Big Ten that I've become to expect the last 20 years, and it's just not been. Boy, I don't know. They haven't, it seems like they're looking out for their cash cows more than they are the interest of their teams in a lot of ways. So, but anyway, what it means for Michigan, I think shut it down. How many kids are going to want to play in that extra game after being off for 2 games? Michigan, what would it be? Illinois? Who would it be from the West right now? I don't even
Probably
know.
Purdue.
How many kids would say, okay, I'm opting out. You know what? We've got a lot of breakout. We got a lot of kids here. Why do I want to get back there and put myself in jeopardy and, for a meaningless game? And it is a meaningless game that, nobody's going to care about. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I say bag it. And if, yes, it'd probably be different if they were, 5-0 or something, or 6-0 right now, but they aren't. So it doesn't make any sense to me to proceed.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I think a lot of the guys with attitude issues on this team would not want to play in that game, and that's unfortunate because in 2018, when Michigan played Florida in that bowl game and we saw 4 guys sit out and opt out of that game, I think it would be much, much worse this time around. Granted, that game in 18 meant a lot more than a potential 9th game would this year, but I agree. I think it's time to close the book on this year, turn the page. This Michigan coaching staff, Jim Harbaugh and the rest of the coaches on the staff, showed that they don't know how to fix the problems on this year's team, and this team is not getting any better, and that's concerning. They've regressed since that Minnesota opener, so I don't think this team would improve if the Ohio State and 9th game and a potential bowl game were to be played. And again, I think that you close the book on this year and not necessarily forget that it ever happened, but take the offseason to realize what you all did wrong, which it's a long list of things, but use the offseason to improve, reflect, and then hopefully go into 2021 with, the appropriate adjustments and improvements, and maybe have some hope heading into next year.
Yeah, I will say I completely understand where you guys are coming from. I just kind of the theory that, if you can play safely and things like that, and you actually have proper time to practice, that, I think that, you should play. We'll see what happens. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Jim Harbaugh to get back and in that last week and say, well, we're ready to go, and this game's, supposedly on the schedule. We'll see what the Big Ten even does with those games anyway, but yeah. It'll be interesting. Certainly, I mean, no one knows what the precedent is here for any team. But that now raises questions. Let's say Michigan's played their last game. Let's say they haven't. Going forward, you have a coach with 1 year left on his deal, which he can't have going into the next year. So it's basically in the next month or so, he either signs an extension, steps away, is asked to leave. But obviously, Chris, you've been kind of, all over this thing here in the last 24 hours and even before that, but certainly the info coming in the last 24, 48 hours on what could happen. And now Ward Manuel, I mean, I know they're dealing with a lot and, trying to shut down the facility and all that, but there's a little bit of time now to think less about games and more about what's next. So I guess what is the latest? You had some big reports yesterday.
Yeah, and we'll leave the majority of it behind the paywall and let people go ahead and read it there before somebody steals it and puts it on YouTube anyway. But I will say that it is looking more and more like Jim Harbaugh will be back. It is looking like it'll be a 3-year deal, and that's how he's operating right now. There will be significant staff changes. I don't think there's any question about it. We'll see how many kids stick around, but from what we've heard, Jim Harbaugh is ready to prove that, hey, this was just a fluke year, and he's had some good years here, with the exception of some of the Ohio State games, clearly, and he wants to right the ship, and that he's betting on himself is what the phrase was that we heard. So that could mean going back and getting some guys surrounding him that are he's familiar with and comfortable with, and not taking chances on coaches that he didn't know before and that haven't really worked out here. I can think of 1 or 2 in particular. So I think there will be a mix-up and a staff switch up a little bit. So we'll see, but that's how they're operating, and that's what recruits. We know that for a fact, and that he's planning on being here. And we'll see if he can get back to being the jackhammer, man, because, it would be ideal for everybody if this guy got back to being the coach that he was. They didn't have to make another change, and you didn't have to change, the entire culture, even though it's bad this year. You didn't have to change everything in your program about the offense. You can't keep asking these kids to switch up offenses and defenses, and not having a safeties coach, for example, this year, Bob Shoop not coaching on the field, all these things not fair to the kids either. So we can understand where they're coming from in terms of, okay, we didn't get a fair shake here, but you hope that the kids that really want to be here and really want to compete will stick around, that Jim Harbaugh is the guy that he comes back and is the guy that everybody remembers, the guy that coached at Stanford, the guy that coached at San Francisco in the first 2 years at Michigan, frankly. And it does a little bit better job at identifying players on the recruiting trail rather than athletes, and turns this thing around. I have my doubts, and I think a lot of people would, and I think that's fair. But, if it works out, then it'd be ideal.
Yeah, I think Chris summed it up perfectly. I fully expect him back as well next year. I think a lot of people are realizing that at this point. I have my doubts as well. It's hard to imagine him getting Michigan back to an elite level like they were in 2016. Hopefully he can do it. I don't think he can at this point. But again, he's proven it in the past. You talked about the fire and the energy that he used to have. I think everybody wants to see that 2009 Jim Harbaugh back when, he's what's your deal, Pete Carroll, after the Stanford game that year when they killed him. That's what we need to see again. That's the Jim Harbaugh that so many people came to know and love, and obviously it hasn't been here the last few years. One big positive about him potentially coming back next year is that 2021 recruiting class. It's a top 10 class right now. It's ranked number 9 in the country, and that class would likely stay almost fully intact. They'll probably lose a commit or two, but for the most part, it sounds like that most of the commits in that class are going to stick, assuming Harbaugh returns. A lot of guys have been very outspoken about their support of Jim Harbaugh and having him back in Ann Arbor next year, specifically J.J. McCarthy, the 4-star quarterback, the top 40 prospect. He's obviously the gem of the class, and he's been as outspoken as anybody about wanting Harbaugh to return. So I guess that's one positive about Harbaugh coming back, is that you are bringing in a solid class, which he's done almost every year he's been here, but it'd be good to keep that class intact and hopefully give you some momentum during signing day and February, even though that's obviously not much of a signing day anymore, but heading into this 2021 offseason.
Yeah, and there's no certainty with whatever happens. I mean, everybody, even if you want him back, has their doubts, and you've seen it go, one way where, a team sticks with a coach for too long. You've seen it go the other way where they get rid of a guy and then they wish they could get 9-10 win seasons back, like a Nebraska, or, look at Texas, and plenty of teams out there, even LSU, until Ed Orgeron, basically got the top assistants in the country all surrounding him last year in the Heisman Trophy winner. Let's say, I think the Michigan fan base is split. And there's certainly been a ton of noise throughout the season that this has got to be it. They've got to move on. And then there's, people that are like, okay, let's get rid of this year. Let's get not rid of this year, but move on from this year, get this thing going, make some changes and move on. I think everybody agrees though that they got to do something quick. We've mentioned recruits, signing day is less than 2 weeks away. You got to get this thing done because, one way or the other, and basically say that, he's going to get an extension, or, kind of show that the writing's on the wall that he's not. Obviously, it looks like he's going to, but timing is huge here, Chris. I guess, what are you hearing on when the timetable could happen here?
Yeah, they're operating under the assumption that it's done, and they have been the whole time, and that's the thing. Not hearing it from Ward Manuel, people can say, well, is Jim thinking it and Ward's thinking something else? I don't think so. I would assume that they've talked, and that okay, this is what we had in place, and this is what's going to happen, adjusted for COVID and stuff like that. I can't see him getting an extension where he was making as much money as he was before, A, based on results, and B, based on what's been going on with COVID and everything else, and the financial problems that they've been having at the university. And, every university, not just Michigan, if you don't have ticket revenue and if you don't have all kinds of revenue generated by your football program, then you're going to have to make some cuts and you're going to be struggling. And that's exactly what's happened. And we've seen that. So I would expect something, first and foremost, you're going to sign the recruits, right? That's the big part of stability is recruiting, and with the early signing day, I think that actually helps them, right? Especially if you've got all these guys on the same page and saying that they're going to come, and because even if you sign them, let's be honest, if there's a coaching change, these kids are allowed to transfer, and they're going to be allowed to transfer once anyway, and but it wouldn't even count. So as one of their transfers, they could get out of their letters of intent. So I don't know that Ward Manuel has to come out and say, look, this is what's going on at this point. And then what? Are you going to have every columnist in the country talking about how stupid Michigan is and this and that, and it's more negative press? So maybe you wait until after signing day. I don't know. I do expect something by the end of the month. However, that's what we've continued to hear. But I do think that the decision's been made. That's the opinion that I have right now based on all the information from a lot of different sources and knowing that that's how Michigan and Jim Harbaugh are operating.
Yeah, Ward Manuel and Jim Harbaugh know how important this contract extension is, and I think that they've probably handled it fine behind closed doors. I don't think Ward Manuel needs to come out and make a statement on Jim Harbaugh like so many national reporters around the country want him to do. They are the ones who claim that Jim Harbaugh was on the hot seat, and I don't think that was ever the case. Again, I think this thing is being handled fine. They're going to criticize Michigan regardless, no matter what happens. So again, Manuel and Harbaugh know how important this thing is. They know signing day's right around the corner. I think Harbaugh is telling recruits all the right things based on what we've heard. So I don't think this whole contract extension or lack thereof is half as bad as the national reporters want to make it out to be.
How much of this is fixable? Let's say he comes back and, we've heard about the culture issues that are obviously happening on the team. We've seen some issues with some scheme. We've seen a lack of energy at times, a lack of enthusiasm from the team, which can happen when you lose. But, they didn't come out in that Michigan State game after a big win over Minnesota, which is little fool's gold. But they didn't come out energized in that game either. So it wasn't just the losing that was the cause of it. Let's say there's, 5 new assistants, 7 new assistants, 4, whatever the number is. How fixable is this with the one-time transfer rule about to get passed? Jim Harbaugh ironically was championing. I guess what do we expect going forward in a big picture? And I know it's tough to say, but just a gut feeling.
I think they've got enough on the offensive line to build around a good young offensive line with a coach in Ed Warner, who I think is a very good offensive line coach. They've got some decisions to make with some veterans, though, that you need to put guys out there that aren't going to make stupid mistakes and aren't going to get blown backwards, and find those guys and go with them. But I think they've got a good core group to build around, and we've seen Ed Warner's lines continue to get better. This year is a bit of an exception because of the injuries, man. Come on, you're replacing 4 guys that are now in the NFL, and then you're doing this whole rotation when guys get injured. So he gets a pass for me, but I've seen enough talent there. I think they're going to lose a couple of young guys, probably, who either see the writing on the wall, maybe they're homesick. But there are enough guys there, and we've heard enough about them that I like that line. I think you're going to have a couple quarterbacks, and Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy battling it out, that the future is bright at that position. You hope. We haven't seen enough from McNamara to know for sure. His shining moment was against Rutgers, and then he got hurt against Penn State after a first drive in which he looked pretty good, frankly, I thought, against Penn State. But no downfield passes. We have no idea what he could have done in that game. Everything was horizontal. So it's the defense that you have to worry about, guys. I think there's some talent at receiver. I think they need a receivers coach. I'm watching the route trees too, and some of the routes and the way these guys round them off, not okay. Needs to be better there, and need to have a dedicated wide receiver coach that's not also, being your offensive coordinator. But the defense is where you worry. Do they have enough beef on the defensive line? No. And guys that are there that are 300 plus pounds are playing too high and getting blown off the ball. That's just the way it is. They can talk all they want to about the improvement from a Donovan Jeter and Chris Hinton's potential, but there are very few stalemates even at the offense or the defensive line. Linebackers, I think you're going to see them need a few more bodies there. Hopefully some of the young guys step up. Cam McGrone's future, we'll see what happens there with the serious knee injury from what we've heard. So, will he be back? Will he go pro? Will he even be here next year? I don't know. He wasn't playing great football, let's be honest, even before that. But Adam Shibley is not the answer. They can like him as a walk-on, but that is not going to win football games for you. So corners at 2, you need depth. Safeties, you need depth. They need to upgrade at a lot of positions, but it starts, guys, with getting all the guys on the same page and playing the guys that really want to be here. And I think we saw too much selfishness and a bunch of guys whining and complaining. We've heard about parent calls and everything like that. So that's where it starts for Jim Harbaugh, is to regain control and put the guys out there that really want to play.
I agree. I think that Michigan has enough talent next year to be a very good team, maybe a 9 or 10 win team. I don't think that's a stretch. I don't think talent was the issue this year either. You talked about the attitude and the mindset, and that's what needs to get fixed, in my opinion, and that's on Jim Harbaugh to get that fixed heading into next year. You talked about most of the positions on the team, but they do look pretty darn solid at a lot of positions heading into next year, whether it's McNamara at quarterback or all the stable of running backs they have, or Ronnie Bell and the groups of receivers, the offensive line. I think the talent is there. One interesting thing to keep an eye on this offseason is to watch who all transfers. You're bound to have several transfers. That's going to happen every single year, but especially in a year when you're coming off a very bad season like they are this year. And then if they don't have to sit out next year, I think that would cause several more guys to leave. You look at the transfer portal, and it is just absolutely filled with names and talented players all across the country. So you're bound to have some transfers. That's nothing to freak out about from the fan base. It happens every single year. But another thing is which seniors and fifth-year seniors are allowed to come back, because, again, it's as if this year doesn't count in terms of what class a player is this year, and every single player in the country can come back next year if they want to. So we did an article this past week at the Wolverine.com looking at all the seniors and fifth-year seniors on Michigan's roster, and there's actually not that many. There's only about 10 or so, but some key guys in that group. Carlo Kemp would be a nice boost if he were to return for his 6th year. Nick Eubanks is another one at tight end. Chris Evans at running back. So that'll be another interesting thing to keep an eye on this offseason, which guys return from that group and whether or not Jim Harbaugh can get these guys mentally right heading into each game next year.
I don't think I don't think Eubanks is coming back, nor do I think he wants to. Half the time, it doesn't look like he wants to be out there now. I hate to say it, man, and that's kind of harsh. But and other guys, there are some guys that you have to move on from to make room for the younger guys and to get them more reps. For example, Carlo Kemp. I like Carlo Kemp a lot, but you've got to get some of those young guys in the rotation and really start depending on them. And to me, the veterans, the guys that have been here for a long time. First of all, you've got to figure out, again, which guys are really invested into making this program better. And then I think you build the culture around the young guys, because I know there are a lot of them, and speaking to some people on the team, parents and things like that have been waiting their turn, and they are as disappointed as everybody else with what they've seen from some of the stuff on the field and what they've heard from some of what some of these kids are and their parents are saying. You can't build a culture that way. So at some point you got to move on as well. I thought some of your numbers were a little high, Austin, and that's okay. Maybe they prove to be right, maybe they don't. But to me, it's time to start seeing what these younger guys can do and building a program around them.
Yeah, and to be fair to Mr. Fox, I mean, who the hell really knows,
Yep.
About some of these kids and what they're thinking, and like Austin wrote, if they know what they're thinking. So, yeah, and I think some of those older guys are what they are at this point. You mentioned Nick Eubanks. I mean, you can go over the film. I'm sure they go over the film with him every week, and nothing seems to change. So he kind of is what he is, and guys like that, I would rather have more reps for a Luke Schoonmaker and Eric All, and just let them be the guys at that tight end spot and take the reins. I also think, depending on the coaching staff moves, if Jim Harbaugh brings in an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator that he feels more comfortable with that system, and first and foremost feels more comfortable that scheme's going to get it done, but something that he feels more like he's a part of, and less CEO than delegating, then we'll see what happens if the major changes are made. If he's willing to do the things that need to be done to do this, or if it's going to be more of the same that we've seen in the past year or two, really since the end of the 2018 season. So it's going to be fascinating, but this next month is going to be crazy. Chris, anything else? I know you'll be all over the story, and everyone can get the coverage at thewolverine.com using the promo code BLUE60. Try us out for 60 days.
Yeah, I just think let's see what happens here in the next couple of weeks. I think it's big. It is nice. Our EJ Holland is posting, the other recruits that are planning on signing. And that's a boost for Jim Harbaugh. Let's be honest, that these kids still have faith in him. And in speaking with people, the kids like Jim Harbaugh. Everybody's like, oh, he's not the same guy, this and that. But I can tell you, in speaking with people on the team or close to the team, that the kids do seem to like him, but they need some direction here, and they they need proof that they are being coached right. I think it's fair to question some of the coaching on both sides of the ball the last couple of years, and especially this year. You have to have confidence in those guys, not just the head guy, the leader, but the guys underneath him. And I think that's the big next step for this program. And Jim Harbaugh needs to get some guys in there that can really, really coach.
Yep. It will be it's going to be a crazy month here, and who would have known, but this is par for the course 2020. Games might be all canceled, and might be all focus shifting to the future here, but stick with us at thewolverine.com for all that coverage. We'll talk to everybody next time.